Pete Wicks here, coming to you once again with One Piece chapter 1136, entitled The Country That Awaits the Sun. So, we're back from a long break and we have our cover story today. And finally, we're getting to something interesting. We're getting to a point of which I thought this was going to go eventually. So, Yamato has beaten up Hold'em, and Hold'em has taken Yamato, Speed, and Tama back to his boss's hideout, and his boss seems to be Who's Who as they approach a building with a motif at the top of it that looks like Who's Who in his Sabretooth form. So, this is where I thought things were going to go, because I said so many chapters ago that I thought this was going to go in a similar way to how Oden's story played out, how he was going to the different prefectures of Wano and then getting guys, and then those guys became his 9 scabbards. I think that's where this is going to go. Because the funny thing about the Beast Pirates is that there are still a lot of mysteries about them that weren't covered in Wano. For example, what is Who's Who's actual name? We don't know that. What was his tenure as a Cyberpol agent? What is he? Is he an Oni? Because he has horns. He had horns way back when he was serving in Cyberpol. So it's likely that he's an Oni. Especially seeing how he's kind of big, not like Moria big, but still quite big. And I will say it does make sense that Hold'em is working under him now, because Who's Who was known for keeping many a Catman around, and his entourage was in the Beast Pirates. So that all makes a lot of sense. Now, what I'm wondering is that based on this, are we going to get guys like OT and Page One and Black Maria and Jack? Now, Jack is a very odd point, because as far as we know now, we have the names revealed of the other 2 calamities already. As you know, King's real name is Albert and Queen's real name is Cyan. So we still need to find out what Jack's real name is. It'll be fun if his real name was actually just Jack. That'd be great. But we don't know his real name just yet. And then 2, we don't know the father of OT and Page One. So that's another point that needs to be found out at some point in the future. So I think this is the actual start of Yamato building up her 9 scabbards. And then presumably, like Oden, she will then leave Wano, and they will then be the guards of Wano under Momonosuke. So in a weird way, it's like the Beast Pirates never actually left, because their boss would still be a giant dragon fish guy, which is a funny thought to think about. But anyway, I think this is going to be very interesting moving forward. I don't know how many characters are going to be involved in this, because we have Hold'em, right? I don't know if we're going to see like Poker or Babanuki. I would think we would. We have Speed here too, so I'm not sure about that. But I think what is being implied, but we don't really know, is that King is an Impel Down, because I believe we see King during the Vegapunk speech. We don't know where Queen is. Queen, I could see an Impel Down. I think that's a possibility. But we'll have to find out. They could be hiding out in Wano, but seeing as how they were confronted by Green Bull, I think it's more likely that both of them have been captured. So that's a big wait and see, but I'm very interested to see where this goes. I'm happy that we're finally getting somewhere, because it felt like for the past 21 installments of this thing, we were dragging our feet. This is volume 22, A Mysterious Hidden Base in Udon. So yeah, And of course, Udon now is a lush forest because of Green Bull. So yeah, we'll see where the rest of the guys are. I can imagine they're all just spread across Wano. Because I always imagined too that Wano would kind of, in a weird way, be protected by yokai. And then the remnants of the Beast Pirates would be the yokai because they're all weird freaks, zone fruit users and artificial zone fruit users, etc., etc. So they would be like the yokai, they would be like the Oni. So Oni and yokai are now protecting Wano in service to Yamato, who is the daughter of their former boss. So it's so funny in that way because I've always said both Yamato and Momonosuke are just Oden and Kaido mixed and matched in weird ways because you can find aspects of both of them in either one of them, which is all just very interesting how that's set up. So I could see Yamato rounding up all the former Beast Pirate boys and then in service to her, they serve under Momonosuke. I could see that happening. And therefore, Wano would be very, very stoutly protected, which frees her up to actually go off and join the Straw Hats, presumably. I hope so, because there's too much, how can you say this? There's too much lore attached to her. And we'll get into that in this chapter, because I also find it very interesting that we approach a building motifed after Who's Who, and Who's Who is the first one who tells us about Nika. And then on top of that, Yamato is the only other Zoan Fruit user in the series with any sort of cultural relevance that is on par with Nika, because all the other supposed mythical Zoans are, well, they're just like yokai and weird monsters. No culture actually cares about them, but people care about the wolf that Yamato turns into. And now at least two cultures in particular care about Nika, the Buccaneers and the Giants. So from that's how the two connect. And that's why I think Yamato is ultimately going to be super important moving forward, especially seeing as how we're spending so much time here. I don't know how long this compares to other cover stories, but it's a long one. Oh my goodness. 22 entries, and we're not nearly done. 22. But anyway, we have a banquet in Elbaf. Luffy comments on the meat tasting like dinosaur meat, even though he was told it was moose meat because Stanson and Haruden thought they killed a moose. But we know it's the Edosaurus that appeared in Strong World. So Luffy's taste buds are on point. He is a meat connoisseur. He knows his meats, which again, too, this is a funny callback, I guess you could say, to Little Garden, because that's when we were introduced to giants and dinosaurs infested that island. So yeah, Luffy's eating a dinosaur. He's eating dinosaur meat. Then what's very funny is I believe this is Colin running in the background, and he's striking the Nika pose as he's running. How odd is that? But that follows Yorl telling us that a lot of humans think the underworld, the snowy place of Elbaf, is Elbaf proper, and therefore no one actually goes off to explore the island, which is kind of funny. And that's why giants get their kind of rambunctious and terrible reputation, I guess. It's also funny that Oars died in a snowy place, and then in the next panel, Usopp is talking about Oars. You don't think that's weird? Because Yorl is talking about the Nether realm, right? Which is all winter. It's all snowy. And we know Oars died in a snowy place. So that's really weird that that's mentioned. The Nether world is mentioned. And then Oars is mentioned right afterward. I just find that interesting, especially considering how, well, Oars died in a snowy place. Following that, we have giants commenting on Jinbei and Brook as they never seen anything like them before, which is really weird thinking about it, because we know that there are wontons, half fishermen, half giant. So I wonder, do wontons even live on Elbaf proper, or are they in other parts of the world? Then again, Big Pan had a fairly normal skin tone and normal facial hair. There was nothing really odd about him, except for like the weird blotches on his arms. So he may not be considered strange at all. But Jinbei's a dead ringer because he's actually blue. So that's why he incurs fascination amongst the giants that are sitting with them. That makes sense. And Sanji's gooning over giant women, which that's a good joke. I like that joke. And yeah, Brook is strange because Brook is actually a unique creature that many people will probably never see in their lives because he's a talking skeleton. So the fascination for him is understandable. And that's when Road apologizes for being a creep. And if Usopp had held Zoro back, it would decapitated him, which would have been for the best, as Gerd says, which is very funny. And throughout these exchanges, Ro likes aggressive women, which I find very funny and very good. But then that leads into Ro declaring his dream to become the sun deity and rule of the world. This starts a outbreak of argument between the meaning of Nika, whether he is the deity of liberation or the deity of destruction. However, this leads us into lore because apparently in the Harley text, which I assume is something Robin is going to read in the future. They didn't have that at the Library of Ohara, or maybe that was found recently, seeing as how this is a legend specific to Elbaf, perhaps. So either way, I'm willing to bet since she's still in the library, she most likely will read about Nika and will be able to translate what the meaning of Nika is. And Jarl says, no one can say for sure which translation is accurate, and this is the result. And according to the text, the world has been destroyed twice over, which is a very interesting statement because from Vegapunk's speech and the sections of the world that have been flooded and the ruins that we see in the flood, that's believable because we've already established that the One Piece world is a post-apocalyptic world. So I could believe that this has happened twice over, which means the lore gets real deep because from this, it's apparent that Joy Boy was not the first holder of the human fruit model Nika. There was a user before him because what's been, I guess, building up over the course of the story after mythical Zoans were introduced as a concept, the actual animal, the actual figures that mythical Zoans are based off of don't actually exist. The only mythical creature that is real for sure 100% and is naturally occurring in the One Piece world are dragons. And at that, Western style dragons, four-legged winged dragons, not the dragon that Momonosuke and Kaido turn into, because those technically, they are dragons, but they are described as fish. They are under the fish fruit models. So technically, even though they are dragons, they are fish. They're fish because that's how the legend goes. The dragon was originally a fish, a carp, and then he jumped over the waterfall to become a dragon. So both of their fruits are fish fruits. All the dragon fruits so far have been dinosaurs, but I've done videos on this. There could be a dragon fruit that's styled after a Western style dragon in the future, especially seeing as how in the One Piece world, a Western style dragon is a naturally occurring creature that most likely has gone extinct due to people like Ryuma, which we find out in Monsters, which has now, I guess you could say, been canonized due to that Netflix special. But anyway, the next interesting part that we see is a new depiction of Nika that speaks volumes, okay? Because he is depicted now with a sword and a shield. What is then said about the Hagoromo is that it is always white, like his hair and like his clothing. And he's always depicted or described by having a booming laugh. So white is specific to Nika, and having cloud-like texture to the Hagoromo and the hair is something specific to Nika. We know that now. So I did a video a while back saying I wonder if Hagoromos were specific to the nature of the user who awakened the fruit. What's interesting about this now is that I think, at least with the human fruit model Nika, it's locked in that he's always cloud like, which could mean some interesting things. It could mean that Luffy is actually paraboling. Thinking about it, the things that make sea and island clouds, he could just be that. Shout out to, I believe his name is Will of Fire on my Discord, the Digital Burrow, because he had a long write up about paraboling and how it can become anything. And I think I want to do a separate video about that. But shout out to you, because you were very correct from this description, because I can't see it any other way, especially seeing as how, well, from what we've seen in the Lucy versus Luffy fight in Egghead, he can make things out of his cloud hair. So, hey, and what did Dials do? Dials could make objects like the Isen Dial that Ohm had. He could turn his sword into a whip and a block wall. So with that being said, it's all very, very possible that in the future, Luffy could just be the paraboling man. That's not impossible now. That's a very, very high possibility. So that's all very interesting. I can't wait to see more about that. But now the shield is an interesting addition, because in the depictions of Nika that we see Who's Who bring up, actually, which is why the cover story is so interesting, because he's the first one who even gives us a depiction of Nika and his weird explanation. But he's always depicted with a sword and a spear, not a sword and a shield. So maybe the depiction of Nika is very culturally based. So if there's another culture that believes in Nika, maybe they depict him with a spear and sword instead of a shield and sword, because shields and swords are very emblematic of Elbaf, because everyone we've seen has had a sword and a shield, or an axe and a shield. So I could see that being the case. The interesting thing is that Luffy doesn't use a sword or a shield, or a spear for that matter. So it's all quite fascinating that he's always being depicted with weapons. And I think we'll have to make another video about that, which could explain some things about Luffy himself. But yeah, this is the first time Luffy's actually getting a breakdown of whom Nika is. And he brings up Bonnie and says, oh yeah, that's the guy Bonnie mentioned. And then Jarl goes on to say that Nika is a symbol of hope to the hopelessness and liberation to the desperate needing salvation. And then, of course, Luffy actually puts two and two together and says, no wonder everyone's been saying I look similar, but I'm sure he's got nothing to do with me. Shout out. And we got half on the show sometime, because so many people on TikTok were mistaken, except this one guy. Anthony Isaac on TikTok had been saying for the longest that there would become a time in which Luffy finds out the lore about Nika and doesn't care. Because so many people, and this, I never spoke on it, but I have said that I think the devil fruit journey for Luffy is over. But so many people had came to the conclusion to think that once Luffy put two and two together and he found out that he was a deity, that this would unlock something deep within his Devil Fruit understanding or whatever. The problem with that is awakening is when your mind and body have caught up to your abilities. And Nika is not about being a deity. Nika is embodying the spirit of liberating the downtrodden, raising up the weak, and protecting those who can't protect themselves, fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. That's Nika. It doesn't have anything to do with titles. So, by Luffy having those principles from the beginning, and then just naturally growing throughout the story, he already understood the principles of Nika because he was living by them the entire time. All of what he needed was to just get stronger. And that's what happened. He got stronger and then he awakened. That's why I say, for all intents and purposes, the Devil Fruit journey has ended. Now we just need to explore all the possibilities of what it can do. Now the journey begins with Haki, or the rest of the way to go would be a Haki developing journey. Because Haki, ever since, I guess, Elephant Gun, really not even Gear 4th, ever since Elephant Gun was introduced, Haki has always been well, at least since the time skip, has always been a great help to the rest of his moveset. Because you have Red Hawk, that uses Haki. Elephant Gun, that uses Haki. All the Gear 4 stuff uses Haki. And now what it seems to be the case is that Gear 4th has been cannibalized, or at least its techniques are easily accessed while Luffy is in base. So yet again, Haki control remains important even after awakening has been achieved, which is why I say Gear 6 is probably a high possibility, because now it's just going to be using Haki mastery in conjunction with the powers of his Dofru. Therefore, all these sort of form changes that Gear 4th is known for would probably be put into Gear 6, and now there'll be like designated forms, presumably, as a possibility. But with that being said, good job, Anthony. He was right. But anyway, moving on. A discussion about Loki then commences. Loki believed himself to be the sun deity, as we all know, and that was the motive for murdering his father, King Harold. And no one agrees with this, as Mount Beard says it. Then that's when Luffy asks, is he a good guy? And then everyone retorts, oh no, he is not. He is an accursed prince. And apparently there was a prophecy before Loki was born that foretold that he would kill King Harold. And shortly after his birth, he killed the royal steed, the horse of fortune, which is interesting because I'll have to look this up, but I do believe in Norse mythology, Loki gave birth to a horse. So it's funny that in Norse mythology, Loki gave birth to a horse, and then in One Piece, Loki killed a horse as soon as he was born, which then is a very interesting point because it is, I guess, paralleled with Linlin, because she too killed Fallbeard around that time. So I don't know. That's interesting. That's interesting that the two are being compared here. I find that fascinating. But then the tragedy is piled on because a year later, the queen herself passed. Loki went on to make the underworld his playground and sick the beast that we saw a little while ago upon the village, and he endangered countless lives with his mischief. We get a lot of interesting silhouettes of Loki here, which is odd, because this doesn't happen after a character's design has been revealed. Because at one point, he looks like a little cartoon version of Onigashima a little bit when he's a child. And then we have him, I guess, as a younger man, looking way leaner than he does now as an adult. So I don't know what the truth is, actually. How odd. I don't know what the truth is. And then, of course, we have that first silhouette way back when, where he was proposing to Lola. So I don't know. That's wild. And he caused trouble whenever the king wasn't looking. However, that led to him supposedly killing the king. Now, here's what's interesting about One Piece in general. When someone is talked about like they are the devil themselves, they are usually the good guy in the situation, which I think we see a little bit of that at the end of the chapter. Because if he truly was nefarious, he would have took a certain deal, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But when someone is talked about benevolently, they most likely are the bad guy. So what could have been going on is that we have a Don Quixote Doflamingo situation here. But instead of the father being naive of the world, like Homing was, and Don Quixote Doflamingo being evil and angry that his privileges have been taken from him, which led to his mother's death, I think we have a situation of which King Harold, even though he was supposedly providing education to the people of Elbaf to encourage trade and whatnot, I think some of the goings on might be nefarious in nature, because what could have been happening is that he could have been conspiring with Mother Caramel, which is why giants like Captain John were sent to the Marines. Perhaps that's why. Maybe that's why they have a giant squadron. Maybe giant children were taken from their homes and forcibly put in the Marines. We don't know. But I could believe that being the case, because it doesn't really make sense for Loki to be this much of a bad guy if he's going to do what he does at the end of the chapter. But to continue, we then get an explanation about how Loki stabbed Lord Jarl in the head, and Jarl keeps saying that his helmet saved him, but clearly it did not. So is he like stabbed firmly through the head, like all the way through? That's crazy. But we then find out that Loki's reign of terror finally came to an end 6 years ago. He was running amok at sea when red-haired Shanks captured him. Hearing this, Luffy is very excited, which is when he's taken aside by Zoro, telling Luffy that Loki could be lying and that Luffy is gullible and we can't really trust anything Loki says, which further endears him to be a good guy because of the uncertainty, which is very interesting. We find out then that Nami is tagging along too to meet Loki, and the person who is taking the three of them to meet Loki is Road. I just like to say too that it has been, I think, actually almost 30 years at this point since we've seen the original three off on an adventure by themselves. I can't remember the time, bruh. It may have happened in a previous arc, I do not recall, but this feels really special. It really does. So I'm happy we're at a point in which we're breaking off from the group and it's our three main guys here. Nami, Zoro, Luffy. I like that a lot. And yeah, Road is taking them to meet Loki. And then we find out that there's a pecking order of Nami's slaves, apparently. Zeus is number one. Of course he is. Sweet baby child. Zeus is number one. Sanji's number two, which, yeah, tenure. Well, I get no tenure doesn't matter because Zeus is new. Okay, but yeah, Zeus is number one, Sanji's number two, and that makes Road number three. A very funny point that I'm glad this is brought up is that Road tries to get in good with Nami because they're both navigators, and Nami says not to get close to her ever again, which that's funny. I'm glad that the the similarity in occupation was brought up. I like that. That's good. That doesn't mean anything. That's just a fun fact that I'm glad was brought to light, because we've known that he was the navigator of the New Giant Warrior Pirates for a while now, because of course there was a whole cover story about them. But yeah, honestly, Nami is just in it for the money because she does her famous berry eyes, which another good gag. I gotta tell you, Elbaf has been killing it with the classic gags. I love it. We got Usopp bragging. We got Zoro being menacing. We got Nami being greedy. We're hitting all the points. Banger after banger, bar after bar. I love it. However, we then come to the underworld, and I guess this is the first time we hear Loki's laugh, and it's do ha 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 ha, or do ga ha ha ha, which is good. That's a good laugh. And this is when we find out that, Loki's not a bad guy, because the two mysterious figures offer him a chance to become a holy knight. And Loki pieces together that the two approaching him are celestial dragons. So in becoming a holy knight, he will become a celestial dragon, and he thinks that is beneath him. He thinks they are the scum of the earth. So our boy Loki is not a bad guy, but I wonder if King Harold wanted to be a celestial dragon. I wonder. But what's interesting about this too is that people go out and recruit members to become holy knights. That's really interesting, especially seeing as how the man of the duo is looking more and more like Shanks. It's real odd that we see Shanks recruit Yasopp, ain't it? Seeing as how they can recruit people, that's odd. That's just odd. I think we'll have to do a video about that. That's pretty odd, don't you think? That they could just go out and recruit people as if they were a pirate crew? They're scouting talent? Huh. We'll have to find out about that. But, yes, all the information was, cut off before they could actually get anything useful because a giant crow was heading for them. So they were all captured. So I guess all the informants are Rhodes' puppets in his own personal Elbaf country, because the only crow-like creature that we've seen so far is Rhodes' raven, whom is named Mugen, which then makes me think, okay, so were Rhodes and Loki rolling out with one another once upon a time, and after he got captured, Rhodes split off to join Haruden. So either Loki was the co-captain of the new Giant Warrior Pirates, or maybe after his name is clear, presumably after this arc, he will be the new co-captain. I think either or could be true at this point. I've done videos on both. But yeah, not Shanks is the one who, or it could be Shanks, he's the one who actually proposes the intel, or if they have any intel about Loki. And then we are introduced to Gunko, the woman whom I thought was Uta. She is clearly not Uta, but this is the first time we see a Holy Knight in full design, actually. And while she does not look like Uta, you know who she looks like? She looks like Koala. And it's so weird because they have very similar hats. Their hands are obscure because Koala wears gloves and Gunko has long sleeves. But one of her sleeves is actually turning into a weird ribbon. Now, the funny part about this ribbon is that, one, it chokes out the wolf that Loki has befriended. But two, it has an arrow at the end of it. This is very reminiscent of what Emu did to attack Sabo and Cobra way back in the Egghead arc while Sabo was invading Mary Joie. So, I don't know. What's funny too is that she's got kind of greaves on, greaves and boots, but they're pretty stylish. They almost look like futuristic, kind of like the what do they call it? The German 66 boots a little bit. They're giving that type of vibe. So I wonder if her power is actually a devil fruit, or seeing as how knights have armor, is this outfit similar to the raid suits that the German 66 wear, in that the suits themselves have devil fruit-like abilities? Because they got pretty weird, especially like Yonji's suit gave him like weird robot winch arms. Reiju could absorb poison. The other brothers had like light powers and lightning powers. So yeah, they're very reminiscent of devil fruit abilities. So this could just be the outfit, or she could be a devil fruit user. Now, what could the devil fruit be? I'm going with either ribbons or bandages. Polypede edits here. I just remember that in an SBS, I'll probably put which one it is on screen here, but Oda did go through some devil fruit changes for Black Maria back in the day. She was going to have the dragon fruit model Stegosaurus, or the sash fruit, instead of the ancient model of the spider fruit that she has now. So it could be possible that Gunko could have that sash fruit, which would be very interesting to see a supposed scrapped idea come into the canon. Now, on top of that, it will make a lot of sense too, because this is the chapter in which we are confirming that we'll be talking about some of the antagonists that we meet from the Beast Pirates in the cover story that's going alongside the events in Elbaf. So I think it all comes together quite nicely. Wrapped with a bow, one might say. But anyway, back to the video. Either one makes sense, or it could just be an unravel fruit in which she can unravel parts of her body and they work like mystical bandages, though in the way that it's wrapped around her hand, I'm going with that she's a bit more like, say, Doflamingo, in which she just generates a ribbon and has full control over the ribbon because she does similar hand movements to what Doflamingo did. So most likely she's a fruit user like Doflamingo, in which she has a ribbon or a bandage fruit, and then she can telepathically control the ribbon or the band-aid because of her doing her fingers and weird motions that's similar to Doflamingo doing his weird puppeteering. So if I had to guess, that's more likely, which could lean this being more like a Devil Fruit as opposed to a raid suitability, because it seems almost too fantastical to be a raid suitability. Though we'll have to see, because I could see either, because it's very hard to tell at this point. But seeing as how they are strong enough to suspend a giant wolf in the air as if it were hanging from a noose, I'm leaning more towards Devil Fruit. Could be a raid suit thing, but I'm leaning more towards Devil Fruit. But as the wolf is being choked out as a means to get Loki to fold into being a holy knight, Loki starts to prove why he's one of the best characters in One Piece, because he just says, if you kill my comrade, I am a warrior. I will simply swallow my fury and use that as fuel to turn this world to rubble. Oh my God, he's base. Oh my God. He's so good, dog. I can't believe it. He is amazing. He's fantastic. He's simply amazing. Oh, I love Loki. I love Loki. Yeah, so because he turned out being a celestial dragon, he's not a bad guy. The blame is starting to shift towards Harold. Either Harold is naive or he is evil. One of the two. But with that being said, no break next week. But this was an excellent chapter. Can't wait to see more of Gunko and what the nature of her abilities are. And I can't wait to see whom this Shanks, not Shanks person is, because they're very, very persistent, or at least Oda's very persistent, and not showing us the other side of his face. Also, almost forgot, Gunko is the first woman in One Piece to have heterochromia. Now, I don't know if her eyes are just two different colors or one eye is cybernetic or whatever. I'm leaning towards her eyes just being heterochromatic, because if she were a cyborg, it would be a bit more obvious. But no, she has a regular hand. We see that as the sleeve unravels into ribbon or bandage or whatever. And what's weird, too, is that we find out in the previous chapter that the bandages can actually cause pain when wrapped around an opponent. She doesn't even have to telepathically control them or whatever. So because of that, too, sorry to jump around so much, but because of that, too, I'm thinking this is a Devil Fruit. It still could be a raid suit thing, but I'm really leaning towards Devil Fruit here, because we've got a very diverse power set forming that, well, reminds me of Doflamingo. It really does. And how he could inject people with string via the parasite technique and control them like marionettes. And he could also make a full marionette of himself through the technique called Black Knight. Then that marionette could be dispersed into a giant impregnable cage, which was called the bird cage, that was telepathically controlled by him. So yeah, it's starting to look like, based on how diverse the power set is with these bandages or ribbons, that yeah, this could very well be a Devil Fruit. And I wonder if Gunko really is Koala, because it's weird. Nobody in One Piece has this similar of a hat with goggles, on top of having a short haircut. It's very odd indeed. I wonder. Because they both look like chauffeurs. They look like people who would drive a limousine or a taxi or something because of these hats. So they could be one and the same person. Maybe Koala is a double agent. I don't know. That would be super interesting if she was. Wow. But with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Paula Pede. What?